and we got a few more joining us right now. So I'm going to just hand it to you, Bob, and I'm just going to be your silent co-host from now on. If I see questions come in through the chat, I'll feed them to you. But thank you, Bob, for putting this presentation on.
You bet. So welcome, everybody. So we're going to be talking about Caltrans water pollution control programs and SWPPPs, compliance and training. So most of this presentation is going to be talking about the new Caltrans 8-hour construction stormwater training requirements and how that's been affected by COVID and everything else associated with it. So primarily we're going to be talking about that training and kind of giving you an intro into what the training entails and how it affects the industry. If you're dealing with Caltrans, if you're a water pollution control manager, or if you're an inspector, or someone who writes SWPPPs and water pollution control programs for Caltrans. So that's primarily what we're going to be talking about. So let me find out why this isn't happening here. Hang on for one sec. There we go. Everybody see looking at my screen that I'm sharing. So I'm Bob Shults. I'm a professional civil engineer. I am a QSD. I'm a CGP tour, and I'm a water pollution control manager on several Caltrans projects. So I'm the co-owner of Verux Inc., and we founded in 2010. And we're a full-service stormwater consulting firm. We do document prep, program audit review, SWPPP inspection services for contractors, agencies, and municipalities and developers. So we work for private and we work for public, including Caltrans. We also have, obviously, we do the associated inspections for the projects that we write SWPPPs and water pollution control programs on. And then we also I have a background in heavy civil construction. I worked for Tykert Construction for a number of years as both a project manager and estimator. At the end of my term at Tykert, I was a general superintendent, so I was managing the field operations for $100 to $150 million a year construction district within Tykert. And then I also worked for a consulting firm before starting Verux on large multi-use master planned communities. So I went from there, from Tykert to working for a consulting firm, and then I started Verux. And we continue to do construction management as well as doing SWPPP work, stormwater work for our company. So as I mentioned, I'm a trainer of record. I'm also obviously a QSD, and being a civil engineer automatically, but I have taken the test and everything. I'm a QSD and QSP. We're going to talk about it in detail. In order to be a water pollution control manager now on Caltrans projects, you'll have to have Title 22 training. We'll get into that in more detail, but you're going to need a certificate like this one. This is the Verux certificate proving that you've taken an 8-hour water pollution control manager training course. And so that's my certificate. I trained myself. One of the requirements, if you go to our website, veruxinc.com, there's a requirement if I train you, then I have to keep track of a database of the people that I've trained. So our website, you can book training classes on our website, but also there is a database that we populate there that allows Caltrans, so you go and submit yourself as a water pollution control manager, submit your certificate. Caltrans then can go to Verux's website and put your name in. As it says, I put my name in, and here it says I'm certified. So we have a database that's up to date, showing the people that we have certified through the Caltrans training. Little personal part about this, one last thing about me, that's when there used to be football in California and high school football, that was last year. That's my son catching a touchdown pass in a playoff game last year for Jesuit High School, and he has gone on to, he's going to be playing football for the University of Oregon Ducks, and praise the Lord, he was there for most of the summer, then they sent him home because they canceled the Pac-12 season, and if you stay up on this, he was called back in, and as of yesterday, and we're hoping that this week we get good news, and the Ducks will be playing for a championship this year. So go Ducks. Okay, so training timeline and overview. As of January in 2020, Caltrans issued an update to their specifications, including the new training requirements. So this training requirement has been ongoing, or has been something that's been in the works for about 2 years now. So the history for Caltrans is prior to 2009, prior to the CGP permit coming out, there used to be a requirement to be a water pollution control manager to take a 24-hour Caltrans training in stormwater. When the new CGP came out, Caltrans recognized that there was significant training requirements in order to be a QSD or a QSP, and so Caltrans took away the requirement to take the 24-hour training because they figured you're going to have at least that much training in order to be a water pollution control manager. The one thing Caltrans did is they required people to be which is over and above what the CGP says. They had the water pollution control manager title. And in order to be a water pollution control manager on SWPPP projects, you had to be a QSD. So you had to have that additional. On a water pollution control program project, you could be a QSP. But you had to be a QSD. So over the last 10 years, Caltrans as stormwater coordinators, they've been complaining or concerned about the fact that people may understand the CGP, but they don't, the Caltrans has its own language, its own specification. That specification is used by tons of municipalities as well, but they have their own requirements and standards and inspection forms and everything else, and they're finding that people are getting further and further away from understanding the Caltrans requirements and the inspection forms in particular that are necessary. So they determined, okay, it's time for us to have our own training again and require a training in order to be a water pollution control manager. So in January 2020, that specification came out. As of April 2020, the first Caltrans projects with new training requirements were advertised for bid. And early July, like the 5th, was the very first projects that were awarded based on the new training requirements. Okay. COVID has obviously hindered the ability to train large groups and hold in-person classes. I had large groups lined up and down the state as COVID was becoming an issue, and then when they closed it down, that all went away, and I didn't train for several months because of COVID. Caltrans has been clear, and I'm sure there may be questions that are going to come up, and I've been asked the question many times about doing virtual training, especially now that QSD and QSP training is allowed to be done virtually. But even before that, people were saying, hey, with COVID, we should be able to do these trainings virtually. And people were asking for it, frankly, before COVID in order to be able to get to remote people. But Caltrans has been adamant from the beginning. They want in-person training. They want the hands-on portion of the training to be done. As I said, there have been numerous inquiries. And Caltrans recently reiterated that in-person hands-on elements of the training are too important, so virtual training will not be allowed for the foreseeable future. And due to the difficulty getting widespread training to potential water pollution control managers, Caltrans has issued the following guidance for contractors and REs for zero-cost change order to remove the requirement for an 8-hour training on a project-by-project basis. So this came out in July. So right after the first jobs were awarded, this official memo went out to the REs. It went out to everyone in a blast who was connected to the listserv with Caltrans, which I'll talk about how to get on that in a moment. But basically, elimination, this directive to REs on a project-by-project basis, an elimination of the implementation of the additional training requirement and modification of the qualifications for the water pollution control manager, alternate and assistant water pollution control managers, as defined in section 13, based on the shortage of trained personnel as a result of coronavirus disease. So the reason is coronavirus pandemic has impacted availability of in-person training courses and the water pollution control manager training. Revising the section will eliminate the 8-hour water pollution control manager training requirement, assignment of alternate or assistant water pollution control managers. The method of payment, so what they're made clear here is there's no cost or credit and no time adjustment for this change order. Just so everyone understands, so this is on a project-by-project basis. If you have a project awarded and you are trained, I mean, I've trained, around 100 people. I'm continuing to train once a month to a smaller group, and we'll talk about that. smaller groups in my office here in Sacramento, but again, it's not widespread. So if you have someone who has the training and can do it, then you're probably in your best interest to go ahead and move forward without doing this change order on that project by project basis. If you don't have it or couldn't get the training done, then you will remove RE, using this language, will remove the requirement for that project until such time Caltrans, at some point, COVID goes away and the training can be more widespread. At some point, Caltrans is going to reverse this directive, and then you'll have to have it. So it's good to get it done if and when it's possible. So 8-hour training is now, so assuming, I'm going to go through all the explanations of how this came about and everything else, assuming that you're going to have to do it, because everyone will eventually have to do it. So the 8-hour training is now required to be eligible to be a water pollution control manager. There's my training, this is kind of an overview of the training I do, gets into an explanation of the roles and responsibilities of the primary water pollution control manager, the alternate water pollution control manager, and the assistant water pollution control manager. I'll get into that detail shortly. Assistant water pollution control manager is a new entity or a new role in the project management team on Caltrans jobs. Emphasis in my training will be to train water pollution control managers, assistants, and alternates to properly implement and manage a SWPPP or water pollution control program for Caltrans or someone using Caltrans specs. Following completion of the training, you better understand CGB compliance strategies along with the way that Caltrans does their work. The emphasis is the water pollution control manager is to be an integral member of the project management team and involved in job site and day-to-day operations. So currently there's no subsequent refresher training that's going to go with this. So this is a kind of a one-time training at this point. And a confirmation of a requirement for refresher training will be communicated by Caltrans separately. Now, there's a couple of, we can all know and see if you're involved in the industry that that it's possible, that the new CGP is going to come out shortly. So depending on when this widespread training is out there and when the CGP actually comes and the lawsuits are over with and the new CGP is actually implemented, there definitely is going to need to be an update to this training. So whether or not, depending on how soon that comes, whether or not Caltrans will just issue an amendment to the training to explain how that's affecting Caltrans forms and functions and stuff like that, or whether there's a refresher training. I would guess that sometime in the next 5 years that Caltrans is going to require some sort of a refresher, but as of now, it's not required. My suggestions for people to take down this website, if you're not currently receiving updates from Caltrans from when they have specification changes and updates, then you'll want to go to this list.dot.ca.gov, mailman list info. Go on there and sign yourself up. Put your email down. And don't worry, it's not like you're going to get spammed frequently on this. You'll get an email a month or so from Caltrans as they issue some new directive or a new change to their specifications. Most of the time it might not be directly related to something you're doing. So you could just disregard, but it's very good. And this is how back in January, this is how the new specification was initially put out to everyone before a job was awarded. So it's a good list to be on. At the end of my training, there'll be a certificate of completion that's provided. And again, Verux, as I mentioned at the beginning, Verux will maintain a database of trained participants in the Caltrans for Caltrans to reference if they want to know. And of course, you'll be eligible for PDUs for taking the training class. This website link that I provide at the top of the page here is where you can find the current information on this new training requirement. But essentially, it states that the California Department of Transportation will require water pollution control managers, alternate water pollution control managers, and assistant water pollution control managers who perform the water pollution control tasks to inspect, repair, and maintain practices, collect water quality samples, and record water quality data. And that you will have to have a certificate of an 8-hour water pollution control manager training. So that's the new requirement. The requirement will begin showing up on all projects again in April, and then and moving forward from there. Training requirement is initially a one-time training, as I mentioned previously, and presently Verux and 3 other companies that you can go look up on the internet, I'm not going to mention them here, are authorized to provide an 8-hour water pollution control manager training. So there are 4 total companies right now that are authorized to provide this training. So just an explanation and a breakdown of on Caltrans projects, the difference between Caltrans projects potentially and other CGP projects. And know this, that when it comes to this training requirement that, you know, it's rolling out with Caltrans, but as most of you I'm sure know, many municipalities use Caltrans specifications. So obviously it's rolling out on Caltrans projects, it's rolling out this year. There's going to be this requirement to have the 8-hour training, but in short order, all of these different municipalities that also use the Caltrans specifications will end up adopting the same requirements. So, so this 8-hour training will be a valuable tool in your toolbox in order to be able to name yourself as a water pollution control manager. One of the key differences, so this is based on the training, this flow chart kind of explains it. So as a QSD, in order to be a QSD, you have to have a 3-day QSD class. You have to have an underlying credential, and then you can develop and amend SWPPPs and water pollution control programs. A QSP, it's a 2-day class, pass the QSP exam, maintain an underlying credential, and again, develop and amend water pollution control programs. So that's Caltrans. You can develop and amend water pollution control programs as a QSP, but you cannot develop and amend SWPPPs. Okay, that hasn't changed. Water pollution control manager, the big change, that the compromise to industry with this new 8-hour training is that previously, as I mentioned, a QSD has to be a water pollution control manager for a SWPPP project. Now with the new 8-hour training, a QSD or a QSP can be a water pollution control manager on a SWPPP project. So that was Caltrans was on board with it, but it was definitely a compromise to industry to try and make it a little easier, because having to be a QSD to be a water pollution control manager on SWPPP projects made it more difficult. Now, with the 8-hour water pollution control manager training requirement, you can be a QSP and be a water pollution control manager on a SWPPP project. And then they created this new designation, which is a assistant water pollution control manager, who is a person that can be a designee and can by the water pollution control manager to do inspections, sampling associated with the job. So previously, a water pollution control manager could designate and train someone to be their designee and to do inspections under their certificate, under their water pollution control manager as a water pollution control manager. So now you have to be an assistant water pollution control manager to do that, to have it designated to you. You don't have to be a QSP, you don't have to be a QSD, but you have to take the 8-hour class. So there's benefit to taking the 8-hour class for people who are new people at your firm, people who want to get their QSP but are waiting on the experience requirements in order to get their secondary credential. There's a benefit to having the 8-hour training, because if you are not 8-hour trained and you are asked to do sampling or do the actual in the field inspections under the water pollution control manager's supervision, you're out of compliance with Caltrans specs if you don't have the 8-hour training. One thing to note here, my box on the side, that if the change order is issued on your project right now because you can't get the training, then it refers back to the old requirements. And the old requirement is that you have to be a QSD to be a water pollution control manager on SWPPP projects. So that's the negative of, if you can get your training for the 8-hour water pollution control manager now, you're better off, because then you can have a QSP as the water pollution control manager. If you have to write the change order because you can't get the training, then you're back to the old requirements of having to be a QSD. So this is from the construction site BMP manual. Essentially, water pollution control manager, the person who's responsible for implementation of SWPPPs or water pollution control programs. Whichever is applicable to the project, the water pollution control manager must be a QSP. So I marked out, this is the old language, whenever the project requires a water pollution control program, and when a water pollution control manager must be a QSD whenever the project requires a SWPPP. So that's the change with the new spec. So now QSP can be a water pollution control manager. So again, the new excerpt from the actual spec 13101D4, assign a water pollution control manager to implement the water pollution control. Assign an alternate water pollution control manager to perform all responsibilities when the water pollution control manager is missing. And then alternate must have the same water qualifications as the primary water pollution control manager. And you must assign an assistant. You may assign an assistant water pollution control manager to act under the supervision of the water pollution control manager to inspect, repair, and maintain water pollution control practices, collect water quality samples, and record water quality data. you may have more than one assistant water pollution control manager. There's benefits. So this makes it so you have less amendments that are required. There's benefits to listing all people at your firm that have the 8-hour training and are eligible as either the primary, alternate, or the assistant, because then you don't have to create if you have multiple assistant water pollution control managers, you list them all, and whoever happens to be there at the time, you don't have to write an amendment in order to make that change or to switch assistant water pollution control managers. So the benefit is when you write the SWPPP initially, or the water pollution control program initially, is to list everybody who was certified. So again, this is just the new excerpt from the spec, which is essentially saying that you have to obtain a certificate of completion of the 8-hour water pollution control manager training. And review updates, revisions, and amendments to water pollution control manager training. So this gives 2.2 here, gives them the ability to send out new guidance, like when the new CGP comes out, with changes to the training or changes to the way Caltrans handles it. Okay, training an assistant water pollution control manager. So again, the assistant water pollution control manager's new designation, new role on construction projects, right? And they are people who can be designated to inspect, repair, and maintain water pollution control practices, collect water quality samples, and record water quality data. So the one thing I wanted to clarify, the underlying portion where it says repair and maintain water pollution control practices. There was a little bit of confusion, or we just wanted to make sure there wasn't with REs out there. So this is really a supervisory role for that assistant water pollution control manager. If you're out, you do not have to have the 8-hour training in order to be out there swinging a hammer and putting a stake through a fiber roll. So for a person, actually a laborer out there actually truly maintaining silt fence or installing silt fence, that kind of thing, they don't have to have the 8-hour training. But if someone is going to be doing inspections on it, is going to be saying that fiber roll needs to be maintained, that needs to be a person. In order to be in compliance with the Caltrans specs, that person has to be a designated assistant water pollution control manager, and they have to have the 8-hour training. So there is no more for a water pollution control manager to train a person, a project engineer, or some young person who doesn't have their QSP, to train them to take the samples, to fill out the inspection reports. If they are doing that, they have to have had the 8-hour training. They don't have to be a QSP, but they have to have the 8-hour training in order to be the designee. So just want to try and clarify that. So there's benefits to taking the class for people who are working their way towards becoming a QSP, or just people on a crew or on a job that potentially would be delegated the responsibility to do sampling with the training from a water pollution control manager. You got to now have an 8-hour training as well. Again, if you're going to take the assistant water pollution control manager and have them take samples for you, there needs to be some proof that you've also done some sampling simulations. My training actually has some sampling, hands-on sampling as a part of it. Again, you have to have your certificate. So that's the assistant water pollution control manager. That's a new deal and associated with this new spec. Okay, so going over what a water pollution control manager is and what a water pollution control manager does. So the water pollution control manager, these are some of the key items associated with being a water pollution control manager. You must be the primary contact responsible for water pollution control work. You have to oversee all of the water pollution control work, including the maintenance, inspections and reports, preparation of rain event action plans, sampling and analysis, the oversight of all that, preparation of NEL exceedance reports, and violations reports for receiving water monitoring triggers, annual reports, and water pollution control practices reports. So I'm going to I see that there's a couple of notes here in the chat. I need to bring those up so I can see it. There we go. Great. So yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and type in any questions. So I will go over the Title 22. I see a question about the Title 22 hazardous waste training. I will go ahead and we're going to get into that in detail. It is not the HazWPPP, just FYI, but I will get into that in detail as we continue along with. Let me find my cursor and keep the program going here. Okay, Caltrans, again, oversee and enforce hazardous waste management practices under Section 1411. It's another requirement of the Water Pollution Control Manager. You have to have the authority to mobilize crews to make immediate repairs to water pollution control practices and stop construction activities damaging water, that damage water pollution control practices or causing water pollution. So there has been questions about this in the past, although it's been a while since this has come up, whether or not a consultant like a Verux, like myself, can be the water pollution control manager, because how can a consultant have the authority to make crews immediately repair water pollution control practices or stop construction? And it's common. It is absolutely allowable by Caltrans, has been clarified multiple times that a consultant can be in this role and can have that role. It's just that the contractor has to make it clear to their crews that Bob Shults is the water pollution control manager. He works for Verux. He's a subcontractor, subconsultant, but he has the ability. And if he says stop, you stop. If he says fix, you fix. So anyway, there's earlier on in my career, there was some pushback on this, but it's common knowledge that consultants can be in this place. Obviously, a contractor can, if the person has the qualifications, can also do this and be the water pollution control manager for themselves. But a lot of times that makes it a higher level person at the contractor, and they've got enough other stuff going on that it can make sense to have someone who's a stormwater consultant who's in it all day long and understands the requirements. So the water pollution control manager also assures employees of current training and implement the authorized SWPPP, obviously, revise the SWPPP or the water pollution control program, and then be at the job within 2 hours of being contacted. So I'm going to stop on this and get on a soapbox a little bit here. Caltrans is really cracking down on this, to be at the job site within 2 hours. Unfortunately, there have been some consultants who have essentially rented their certificate out to contractors in order to keep costs down for the contractors, and have allowed and been the water pollution control manager really in name only, and then designated someone on the contractor staff who's not certified to be their designee, and we're not within 2 hours of the project site and could not, and we're really never intending to go to the job site. So Caltrans has cracked down on this. They found out kind of who these consultants are and heard about this, projects that aren't being covered properly, you know, all the way to the point of where some consultants were pulling UPS store addresses to show that they were within 2 hours when they really weren't. So Caltrans is really, in the last year, has really been cracking down on this with consultants. And I don't know that, you know, I mean, if you're going to be a fraud, you're going to be a fraud, but there's always ways to work around it. But just know that Caltrans has been trying to really find out and require water pollution control managers to come out, meet with them, prove that they've been at the job site, and prove they can get there within 2 hours. So it's been a big thing, and they've been removing some of these unfortunate companies from as water pollution control managers. So the 2 hours of being contacted rule is really being enforced by Caltrans. So there's someone who's saying they lost audio. Hopefully that's not widespread. Please let me know, John, if there's an issue. Okay, so then also, so the water quality monitoring is also something that comes up on Caltrans projects. And a water pollution, so a water quality, if there's water quality monitoring items on a Caltrans project, then you have water quality objectives that need to be met. So this could typically is associated with other environmental permits, like a 401 certification where there's in-water work and there's going to be in-water work sampling. So the Caltrans spec says that you can assign a water quality monitor to collect the water samples and record water quality data. The water quality monitor must have the same qualifications as a water pollution control manager and can be the same person. The water quality manager may be the same person as the water pollution control manager, and it's typically is done, although it's not always done. But essentially, if you're going to have 401 sampling, because of this new requirement, and this is the old language, but it basically crosses over. If again, you could have someone take water quality samples for you, but now they're going to need to be an assistant water pollution control manager. They're going to need to have the 8-hour training. So then also in section 14, which is the environmental stewardship portion of the Caltrans specifications, the water pollution control manager must have solid waste storage and disposal, must understand solid waste storage and disposal procedures on the job. So additional responsibilities for the water pollution control manager is to understand about monitoring solid waste storage and disposal procedures. Another one of the requirements and responsibilities. Moving on, and this is getting into the HAZWPPP versus the Title 22. So 14-11 talks about hazardous waste and contamination. If hazardous waste is or will be generated on a job site, the water pollution control manager must be knowledgeable of the proper handling and emergency procedures for hazardous waste under 40 CFR, blah, 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 and must have successfully completed training under the Title 22. Okay, so this is where that requirement comes up. And the purpose of it is the water pollution control manager must be able to oversee and enforce hazardous waste management, inspect hazardous waste storage areas, facility daily, including temporary containment facilities and satellite collection locations, and also oversee hazardous waste transportation activities on the job site. So so some people might say, well, if it's a small job or whatever, maybe there's no hazardous waste, so I don't have to have the Title 22 to be the water pollution control manager. Pretty much all Caltrans projects are going to have something that would be considered hazardous waste, almost always. Guardrail, treated wood waste, any kind of aerially deposited lead, striping that has lead in it. I mean, there's just a lot of different possibilities on a Caltrans project for having some sort of hazardous waste. And so you're very few and far between that you'd be able to find a Caltrans project that wouldn't have it, and so then wouldn't require their water pollution control manager to have Title 22 training. So that being said, to answer the earlier question about Title 22 training, this is the one. I don't have any skin in the game with Hazmat School, but this is their where I took my training, which is this hazmatschool.com. It's a 4-hour online course. So, you know, back when I took it was $125. I don't know if it's changed or not, but it's something that you need to have. You need to have this certificate in order to be a water pollution control manager on Caltrans projects. So it's, you know, just go get it done. Enjoy 4 hours of Title 22. You'll never get those hours back, but you will be certified and be able to be a water pollution control manager. So moving on. Hang on for 1 second. So then when we get into, so one of the things I want to kind of go over is what the 8-hour training. So this is the kind of agenda of the 8-hour training and what we actually cover. Currently, Verux, because of the restrictions with COVID, we are doing the training once a month. We have one coming up on the 30th of September. We have another one in October, at the end of October. And we're just doing that for people who really want to get this out of the way. We're having this training so that some people can do it. We do it inside. We have a large office, large common area. We've converted to a training space where you can be socially distant over 6 feet apart. We have only 9 people at a time maximum in our training space, so that we can have masks and be socially distant. It's well ventilated in here in order to be able to do it. If your company protocols for doing training or having meetings allow that, then you can come in and do it. You can sign up on our website. Again, the intent is, and I know the other companies the intent is when COVID restrictions allow and we can do large scale training, then I'm going to be basically myself personally, I'm going to be on kind of a road show up and down the state of California to do this. I'll be doing large trainings. I'll be tagging on to certain clients, and then I'll be tagging on trainings, you know, like I said, I had training set up in Ventura, Bakersfield, up north in the North State, in Sacramento and Chico and the Bay Area. And so then we'll be tagging on and advertising trainings to the general public and to other smaller entities and consultants so that people can kind of move in and do it. If they don't have a large group that justifies me coming to their office, then I will add more onto it. So so the intent is as soon as it's possible to do that, then we'll do that. In the interim, in the meantime, just again, like I said, so we can try and handle some people who are more local, as we're doing it here in Sacramento, where we can control it. And again, it's smaller venue. because of COVID. So, so the training, this is kind of an agenda of what we go over in the training, what we talked about, some of what we already talked about, which is kind of the basics of what a water pollution control manager is and what their responsibilities are, and the definition of a water pollution control manager, and what the training, how the training requirements and how you fill out the Caltrans training forms associated with it. Then we're going to get into, and we spend a significant amount of time on the SWPPP and Water Pollution Control Program BMPs, how to select them, what they are, understanding them, and then the inspection forms and formatting and documentation associated. We do a couple of case studies. We give an example project with BMPs that need maintenance and don't need maintenance, and explain how to fill out the CEM forms, the CEM 2030, which is the inspection form, which covers quarterly inspections, weekly inspections, pre, during, post. So we'll go through a case study on how to do that, how to fill those out. We'll also be doing a REAP inspection report, the same thing, and we'll get into, so getting to all that reporting, talk about weather monitoring, talk about what's requirement of the weather monitoring and how that works, and go through that. We will get into the resources that Caltrans provides. They have a lot of decent, pretty good resources on how to deal with SWPPPs and water pollution control programs and the difference between the two. We will get into the SWPPP and water pollution control program preparation and the templates that Caltrans utilizes for those documents, because obviously a water pollution control program doesn't have to do with the CGP. It's for projects under an acre, but it's something that is, water pollution control programs are pretty widespread in the state of California by Caltrans obviously, but many other agencies, smaller agencies use water pollution control programs for their jobs that are under an acre. And then the SWPPP and water pollution control program is using Caltrans's templates, access templates, which are a little glitchy, but they do work. And we'll talk about the differences between that template and like a CGP SWPPP template. We'll get into the preparation. Then we get into a pretty detailed sampling and analysis plan section of the training, where we'll do hands-on sampling and hands-on sampling training, and we'll watch some videos about how to do it in the field. We'll get into non-stormwater sampling, which is something that those of you that are on top of the new CGP that's coming out, non-stormwater sampling is going to become, or non-visible pollutant sampling I believe is going to become a big emphasis from the new CGP, and there's going to be much more of it that's going to happen with the new CGP, so that'll trickle to Caltrans as well. So we get into some non-stormwater or non-visible pollutant sampling, how to do that, and then we'll do hands-on training and a tutorial, and we do a little competition, which is about, once you learn, we teach about turbidity and how NTUs are calculated and everything else, and then we'll have a little bit of competition to see how much you've learned with some prizes. And then we get into reporting, the other types of reporting, NAL exceedance reports. Caltrans has an emphasis on notice of discharge reporting. It's a big deal for them, and when to fill out their notice of discharge form when you have some sort of other type of discharge besides stormwater, and when it's not an NAL. So you don't do both, you do one or the other, notice of discharge form or an NAL exceedance report form. And then we'll touch on dewatering. We'll touch on ATS systems, just briefly kind of go over them and how they may affect Caltrans versus CGP. And then, ATS systems, dewatering systems, we'll get into those things. And then just talk about a few other miscellaneous things that are to Caltrans. So we get all that crammed in an 8-hour day. And then you come out of there hopefully having stayed awake and also having gotten a little bit more knowledge about, or a lot more knowledge about Caltrans, but a little more knowledge about CGP compliance as well. So that being said, again, if you have, so you can go to our website, the Verux, www.veruxinc.com. That's where you can go. Again, there's a place where you can book a training class there and learn more about us. If you have questions of me, my contact information is at the website. If you have direct questions about any of this stuff, about how it works, or if anything came up that you didn't get answered here, please feel free. So at this point, I'd be happy if anybody wants to unmute and ask. You can do the chat, or if anybody wants to unmute and ask any specific questions about the Caltrans training requirements, or anything like that.
Well, thank you, Bob. So how much will this training get into like SWPPP amendments? I've noticed that in the Caltrans jobs we've been doing, that it seems to be a real area of not quite understanding what Caltrans is looking for specifically, and just learning their culture when it comes to what needs a SWPPP amendment.
So yeah, we do go into, we'll have a list of the straight out of the SWPPP or the Water Pollution Control Program, what justifies an amendment, but you'll find, I hate to be wishy-washy on the answer here, but you'll find that depending on the district and the stormwater coordinator, they may ask, sometimes they'll ask for more. When it comes to Caltrans, the reality of the situation is that they have very good and very tight specs, and so they really, most contractors are very on top of what the specs say, and they don't want to give more than what the specs require. So sometimes there's some gray areas in there, and amendments can be. But oftentimes, if it's a little nitpicky thing, then sometimes it's not worth fighting over, and you just do it, and the contractor asks you to go ahead and get it done. But I mean, some of the complaints people have had about is like they want a full-scale amendment. When you got a water pollution control previously, you have a water pollution control manager that's designated on the project. That water pollution control manager is going to take vacation for a week, and that you have to designate another water pollution control manager or an alternate nowadays, and that they want a full-scale amendment to have that person listed as the alternate to take the place of the person while they're on vacation. And the process of getting an amendment approved, you may not have it approved before the person gets back from vacation. So, I'm not sure that this might fix it or might not, but the reality is there's a benefit to listing your primary and your alternate water pollution control program water pollution control managers for your company at the outset, and all of your assistants, so you don't have to do an amendment for something like that. So, yeah, it's a process to get an amendment approved. So, you kind of want to avoid having to do more than what would typically be required by the CGP. On our projects, the reality of the situation, when I'm a water pollution control manager, I kind of still go by the rule of thumb and the way I would do an amendment on a CGP project. And most of the time, reasonable REs, that's good. But sometimes you're going to have, if it's in the spec and they want it, you got to do it. So.
All right. Any other questions? Go ahead and type it in if you have one, or just unmute yourself. We're a small enough group. I really appreciate Bob sharing this with us. Very timely workshop. I know our company's been really grappling at getting caught up with these new requirements, and COVID certainly has complicated it. And but this is very, very timely information for us, for sure.
Right. Hopefully that was clear about the assistant water pollution control manager. I know I hit that hard just to make sure everyone understands that's a pretty significant change in order to be in compliance. So you can't just train anybody to do the sampling on a project, as an example.
So Bob, is that basically the QSPs then? The QSPs are now the assistant water pollution control managers?
No, the QSP can be the water pollution control manager now. So you don't have to. The whole point of it being an assistant water pollution control manager is to close the loop a little bit on a water pollution control manager just being able to designate anybody off the street to do sampling. And saying that, well, we did an informal training and now I've got them out there doing sampling for me under my certification. Now that same person has to have the 8-hour training under the belt. They don't have to be a QSP, but they have to have the 8-hour training. So where I see it happening is for, larger construction companies that are trying to do it themselves. They don't want to be their own water pollution control manager. A construction company like a Granite or a Flatiron, or somebody that wants to be their own water pollution control manager. That water pollution control manager is typically someone that's going to be really on top of SWPPP, and they may have 6 jobs that they're going to be, or 5 jobs they're going to be the water pollution control manager on, and they need to have someone else be trained to do the inspections day to day and the sampling for them, or they want to be able to do that. And it used to be that they could just hold a training and have someone who wasn't doing it. Now, on those companies, what I'm seeing is what their intent is to people that they're project engineers, they're straight out of college, younger people that end up getting some of the grunt work tasks on a construction company site. Those people who don't have enough experience to be a QSP, to have their secondary credential, those people now, they need to take this 8-hour training. It will help to train them to do it, and then they can be the assistant water pollution control manager, and they can do the sampling. And that will provide them with more experience, and then as soon as they meet the experience thresholds to get their QSP, it lines them up to become a QSP later. So I think that's how it's going to manifest itself. The primary thing is that for companies who are on a budget and trying to not have a consultant like us do everything and do a turnkey job for them, which is and their best bet to stay in compliance, they're gonna now, they can't just designate someone to go out there and sample. They have to take an 8-hour training. So it's gonna, so that's the thing.
Okay.
There's just because if you don't have it, if you're not listed as assistant water pollution control manager and you're doing that sampling, then you're out of compliance with the contract with Caltrans.
Right.
And this is going to
go ahead.
And it's going to trickle down to other agencies, right? There are a ton of agencies that use Caltrans specs that are going to end up implementing the same thing over the years.
And then did I see right that a water pollution control manager now has to be the one that does the REAPs?
Yes. Well, that's actually the old spec.
Okay.
And actually, yeah, that's in the old spec. So, but previously what was happening is the water pollution control manager was signing them, but they're supposed to be the ones to do it. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, very good information. Anyone have any other questions? Let's see. I think there is a question here. Any general training for all staff in the works, like railroad training, just-in-time training for PCC or endangered species training? Everyone gets a hard hat sticker. So anything like that that's going to show that they've been trained?
We have a hard hat sticker that we provide for people who have been through the training so that they have it. But primarily it's going to be the database and the certificate that we hand out at the end of the training for people to utilize and to keep a PDF version so that they can email it. It can be included, as a part of you're going to be listed as an assistant water pollution control manager or an alternate or a primary water pollution control manager. You're listed in the document. You need to be listed in the SWPPP or water pollution control program, and your certificate gets attached in the appendices or the attachments to the water pollution control program or SWPPP. So it needs to be in there. That certificate's the primary deal. And then Caltrans can then go back and check our database and confirm that it's a legit certificate. And all of the different trainers are tasked with doing the same thing.
Okay.
So, but we provide a hard hat stickers as well.
All right, here's another question. What types of BMPs do you teach in regards to invisible pollutants? And I suppose, obviously Caltrans has bid items, and so you're limited to a certain number of BMPs as well. What BMPs are you covering?
So we're primarily covering just the standard erosion. I mean, we're going to go through we go through each of the tables in the Caltrans, which is the same. Well, it's not the same as CGP, but generally the same. So you're going to go through our sediment control, erosion control, BMPs, non-visible pollutants, our waste management, our dust control BMPs, and we're not going to go through every single one that are listed in the table, but we go through the primary ones. Primarily, it's going to be the visible pollutant BMPs and the turbidity and pH BMPs and that. So it's only 8 hours, so it's not a comprehensive how to install everything. We do get into compost socks. We do have a video there that we present to explain like the difference between some of the sediment control BMPs. So we do talk about that. We don't get into primarily, we watch a video on sample collection and sample transport for non-visible pollutant BMP or non-visible pollutant sampling. So we do get into that, but we don't get into a lot of the non-visible pollutant specific BMPs for this
Okay.
training.
All right. I think that's all the questions we have for right now. So if anyone has any last questions, go ahead and unmute yourself or send one in real quick. And Bob, I want to thank you. It's been very, very instructional. I learned a lot. And in fact, I got a lot of action items I need to take care of. So this has been very good. And thank you for taking time to be with us on Stormwater Awareness Week.
Great.
And just so everyone knows, this was recorded, and we will be uploading this to the same place where you watched it just now. Give us a couple days. We got a lot of videos to process this week, but they will be there. So I'm sure you know of people who need to watch this class, maybe even staff members that need this instruction. And I'm sure, Bob, many of us will be signing up for your class here in the near future. So, all right, Bob, any last words?
That's it. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. And again, if you have any questions, any follow-up questions or whatever, you can get a hold of me on my contact information is on the website. So thanks a lot and hope to work with you guys.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.